Welcome to Whispers of Ink. I'm Machado de Assis, and now I will read one of my stories.
Let's start with the book The Psychiatrist, which is part of my novels collection. Chapter 1. Dr. Simon Bacamarte was a man ahead of his time. Born into one of Itaguai's most respected families, he became the finest physician in Brazil, Portugal, and Spain combined. He studied in Coimbra and Padua, two of the greatest centers of learning in the world, and returned to Brazil at age 34. The king himself tried to keep him in Europe, offering him a place at the university or a role in the royal court, but Bacamarte refused both. "My only duty is to science," he told the king, "and my universe is Itaguai." So he went back to his hometown and gave himself fully to his work. He treated patients by day and read scientific books by night. He mixed medicine with philosophy, using poultices to heal bodies and theories to heal mind. At 40 years old, he married Dona Evarista da Costa y Mascarenhas, a 25-year-old widow of a country judge. She was not what people would call pretty or charming. One of his uncles, a man known for hunting pacas better than anyone and speaking his mind without fear, asked why Bacamarte had chosen her. The doctor explained that Dona Evarista had perfect physical qualities. She digested food well, slept soundly, had a strong pulse, and clear eyesight. These traits, he said, made her ideal for bearing healthy, strong, and intelligent children. As for her looks, he admitted she wasn't beautiful, but he saw that as a blessing. A beautiful wife, he said, might distract him from his true love. Science. But Dona Evarista did not give him any children, not strong ones, not weak ones, none at all. Still, Dr. Bacamarte was patient. After all, science teaches patience. He waited 3 years, then 4, then 5. Dr. Simon Bacamarte spent that time studying deeply the matter. He reread all the Arabic and other medical texts he had brought to Itaguai, sent letters to Italian and German universities, and finally advised his wife to follow a special diet. The honorable lady, who ate only the finest pork from Itaguai, ignored her husband's warnings. Because of her stubbornness, understandable, but unacceptable, saw the total end of the Bacamarte family line. But science has the wonderful power to heal every sorrow. Our doctor threw himself completely into the study and practice of medicine. At that time, one part of it caught his attention more than others: the mental side, the study of brain diseases. In the colony, and even in the Kingdom of Portugal, there was not one expert on this subject. It remained poorly studied or almost untouched. Simon Bacamarte understood that Portuguese, and especially Brazilian science, could win everlasting gloria phrase he used once during a private moment full of excitement. Publicly, however, he stayed humble, as true experts should. "The health of the soul," he declared, "is the most noble duty of the physician." The true physician, corrected Crispum Sores, the town pharmacist, and one of his close friends and dinner guests. The city council of Itaguai, accused by historians of many sins, had one serious fault: they paid no attention to the mentally ill. For this reason, each violent madman was locked inside a room at home, left not untreated but completely neglected, until death took them away. The calm one simply wandered the streets freely. From the start, Simon Bacamarte decided to change this terrible habit. He asked permission from the city council to welcome and care for, in a building he would create, all the mad people of Itaguaí and the nearby towns and cities. He would do so for a payment, which the council would provide whenever the patient's family could not afford it. The proposal stirred up the entire town, creating both excitement and strong resistance. Its true people rarely let go of absurd or even harmful habits easily. The idea of putting all the madmen together in one house, living side by side, seemed itself a sign of madness. Some didn't hesitate to whisper this suspicion even to the doctor's own wife. "Listen, Dona Evarista," said Father Lopes, the local priest. "Maybe you should convince your husband to take a trip to Rio de Janeiro. Always studying, always working isn't healthy. It might confuse his mind." Dona Evarista was deeply shaken. She went straight to her husband and told him she had a strong desire, above all, to visit Rio de Janeiro and eat everything he thought would help achieve some particular goal. But that great man, with the rare wisdom that made him so special, understood exactly what she meant. Smiling gently, he told her not to worry. Then he headed to the city council, where the town's officials were discussing his proposal. He defended it with such powerful words that the majority voted in favor of giving him full authority. At the same time, they approved a new tax to support the treatment, housing, and feeding of poor madmen. Finding something to tax wasn't easy. Almost everything in Itaguaí already had a fee. After long discussions, they decided to allow the use of 2 plumes on horses during funerals. Anyone who wanted to decorate the horses of a funeral carriage would pay 2 coins to the town hall. The amount would be multiplied by the number of hours between the moment of death and the final blessing at the grave. The town clerk struggled to calculate how much money this new tax could bring in. One of the council members, who never believed in the doctor's plan, asked that the clerk be excused from such useless work. "These calculations aren't necessary," he said. "Dr. Bacamarte won't accomplish anything. Whoever heard of putting all the madmen together in one place?" But the honorable official was wrong. The doctor managed to arrange everything perfectly. Dr. Simon Bacamarte got right to work as soon as he received official approval. He began building the house at once, choosing a prime location on Rua Nova, the finest street in Itaguaí at the time. The building was grand, 50 windows on each side, a central courtyard, and many small rooms for patients. Since he had a deep interest in Arabic studies, the doctor found in the Quran a passage where Muhammad says that madmen are sacred because Allah removes their reason so they cannot sin. This idea struck him as both beautiful and profound. He decided to have it engraved on the front of the house. But since he feared the local priest and, by extension, the bishop falsely attributed the quote to Pope Benedict VIII, this pious deception earned him a pleasant lunchtime visit from Father Lopes, who shared stories about the great pontiff. The asylum became known as Casa Verde, a name inspired by the unusual green color of its windows, which had never been seen before in Itaguaí. The opening ceremony was held with great pomp. People came from nearby towns, distant villages, and even from Rio de Janeiro to witness the week-long celebration. By then, several mentally ill patients had already been admitted, giving families a chance to see the kind and Christian care they would receive. Dona Evarista was radiant with pride over her husband's achievement. She dressed in luxury, wearing fine jewelry, fresh flowers, and rich silks. During those memorable days, she truly looked like a queen. Despite the modest customs of the time, visitors came to see her again and again, not only to honor her, but also to praise her. For everyone saw her as the lucky wife of a brilliant man, a remarkable figure. And if some envied her, it was a noble and sincere envy, born of admiration. After 7 days of festivities, the public celebrations ended. At last, Itaguaí had its own house for the mad. Chapter 2. Dr. Simon Bacamarte confided in Crispin Soares, the town pharmacist, 3 days later during a private conversation at his home. "This work of mine," he began, "is not only about charity, although kindness does play a part. Think of it as seasoning like salt in food. That's how I understand St. Paul's words to the Corinthians. If I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. My main goal with the greenhouse is to study madness in depth. I want to understand its many forms, classify each case, and finally discover the true cause of insanity and maybe even find a universal cure. This is what drives me. I believe this mission brings great value to humanity." "A most noble purpose," agreed Soares. "Without this refuge," continued the doctor, "I would achieve very little. But now I have a much broader field for my research." "A much broader indeed," added the pharmacist. And they were right. From every nearby village and town, people suffering from madness came to the greenhouse. Some arrived furious, others calm, some trapped in strange obsessions. They were all the forgotten children of reason. Within 4 months, the greenhouse had grown into a small town. The first rooms weren't enough anymore, so Dr. Bacamarte ordered the addition of a new wing with 37 more cells. Father Lopes, the local priest, admitted he had never imagined there were so many mad people in the world. Even more surprising were the strange cases he heard about. One man, for example, was a rough and uneducated young man who, every day after lunch, gave a formal academic speech full of figures of speech, contrasts, and dramatic addresses. His words were filled with quotes from Greek and Latin authors, showing the style of Cicero, Apuleius, and Tertullian. The priest could hardly believe his ears. "What?" he exclaimed. "This is the same boy I saw playing shuttlecock in the street just 3 months ago." "I'm not denying that," replied the alienist, "but what your reverence sees now is the truth. And this happens every single day." "From my perspective," said the priest, "this can only be explained by the confusion of languages at the Tower of Babel, as Scripture tells us. Long ago, when languages became mixed, it's easy for people to mix them up again today, especially if reason isn't working properly." "That may indeed be the divine explanation of the phenomenon," agreed the doctor after a moment's thought. "But it's not impossible that there is also a human, purely scientific explanation, and that is exactly what I'm investigating." "Very well then, I'm all ears." Truly, there were 3 or 4 patients who had gone mad from love, but only 2 stood out because of how unusual their madness was. The first was a man named Falcon, about 25 years old, who believed he was the morning star. He would stretch out his arms and spread his legs to look like rays of light, and stay in that position for hours, forgetting time completely while asking over and over if the sun had risen yet, so he could finally go back inside. The second patient always walked non-stop around the rooms, through the courtyards, along the hallways, searching for the end of the world. He was an unfortunate soul whose wife had left him for another man. As soon as he found out she had run away, he grabbed a small pistol and chased after her. 2 hours later, near a pond, he found them both. Then, with terrible cruelty, he killed them. His jealousy was satisfied, but the man who took revenge had lost his mind. And since then, he had been obsessed with chasing those fugitives to the edge of the earth. There were also striking cases of megalomaniac delusions of grandeur. The most extraordinary case was a poor young man, the son of a shopkeeper. He would tell everything about his family history to the walls, because he never looked directly at anyone. His story went like this. God created an egg. The egg created the sword. The sword created Davidom. David created the royal robe. The robe created the duke. The duke created the marquis. The marquis created the count. And the count, that's me. Dr. Simon Bacamarte sat down, tapped his forehead, and snapped his fingers. Over and over again, 5-6 times, she repeated. God laid an egg, the egg, etc. Another man, just as strange, was a clerk who believed he was the king's butler. A third was a cattle driver from Minas Gerais, whose madness made him give away herds of cows to everyone he met. Head hand, 300 to one person, 600 to another, 1,200 to someone else, and never stop. I won't even talk about the cases of religious obsession, except for one man named João de Deus. He now claimed to be God João, and promised heaven to anyone who worshipped him and hellfire to those who didn't. Then there was Licenciado Garcia, who never spoke because he thought that once he said even one word, all the stars would fall from the sky and burn the world to ashes. That's how powerful he believed himself to be. That's exactly what he wrote on the paper the alienist gave him. And Simon Bacamarte didn't hand out paper out of kindness. It was scientific curiosity that kept him supplying it. In truth, the doctor's patience was even more unusual than all the madness inside the greenhouse. It was nothing short of amazing. At first, Bacamarte built a team to manage the place. With help from Crispin Soares, the local pharmacist, he hired 2 of the man's nephews. He put them in charge of running things according to a strict set of rules he had written and approved by the city council. They handled food, clothing, paperwork, and everything else. This was the smartest move he could make, so he could focus only on his true work as a doctor. The greenhouse, he told the priest, is now like a little world with both secular and spiritual powers. Father Lopes laughed at this joke and added one of his own just to play along. Just wait, he'll report you to the Pope. Once free from daily chores, the alienist turned his full attention to organizing and classifying his patients. Dr. Simon Bacamarte divided the patients into 2 main categories, the furious and the calm. From there, he moved on to subclasses such as monomanias, delusions, and various types of hallucinations. Once this was done, he began a careful and constant study of each patient. He analyzed their habits, the times when their symptoms got worse, their likes and dislikes, their words, gestures, and tendencies. He asked about their past lives, what they did for work, their routines, how their illness had started. Childhood events, youth experiences, other illnesses they might have had, and any family history of mental issues. In short, he conducted an investigation as thorough as any experienced judge could hope to do. Every day he made new observations, discovered something interesting, or noticed a strange phenomenon. At the same time, he studied the best diets, medicines, treatments, and ways to ease symptoms, not only those described in his favorite Arabic medical books, but also those he found through his own cleverness and patience. All this work took up most of his time and energy. He barely slept and hardly ate. Even during meals, he was still working, grading old texts or thinking deeply about problems. Often, he would go from the beginning to the end of dinner without saying a single word to Dona Evarista. Chapter 3. God knows what he's doing. After 2 months, the Honorable Lady found herself the most unfortunate woman alive. She fell into a deep melancholy, turned yellowish, lost weight, ate little, and sighed at every corner of the house. She dared not complain or scold him, for she respected him as her husband and master, but she suffered in silence and visibly wasted away. One day at dinner, when her husband asked what was wrong, she answered sadly that nothing was the matter. Then she gathered some courage and finally said she felt just as much a widow as before. She added, "Who would ever imagine that 6 lunatics?" She didn't finish the sentence. Or rather, she completed it by lifting her eyes to the ceiling, those eyes, her most charming feature, dark, large, shining with a moist light like the dawn. Her gesture was the same one she had used on the day Dr. Simon Bacamarte proposed to her. The chronicles don't say whether Dona Evarista waved that silent weapon with the wicked intention of killing science once and for all, or at least cutting off its hands. But such a guess seems quite believable. In any case, the alienist saw no other meaning in her actions. And yet, the great man did not get angry, nor even upset. The steel in his eyes remained unchanged, hard, smooth, eternal, and not a single wrinkle disturbed the calm surface of his forehead, quiet as the waters of Botafogo Bay. Perhaps a smile touched his lips, soft as olive oil from the Song of Songs, as he spoke these gentle words. Dr. Bacamarte said to his wife, "I agree. You may go take a trip to Rio de Janeiro." Dona Evarista felt the floor vanish beneath her feet. Never in her life had she seen Rio de Janeiro, although the city was not yet the shadow it would become in later years. It still offered more than the sleepy town of Itaguaí for her. Seeing Rio was like the dream of an exiled Hebrew longing for home. Simon Bacamarte had finally agreed to move back to Rio de Janeiro. For Dona Evarista, this was a dream come true. She had longed for the city's lively streets and familiar comforts ever since her husband decided to settle in a quiet inland town. Now that he had made up his mind, all her hopes returned, hopes she thought were long gone. When Simon told her about the plan, she couldn't hide her joy. He took her hand gently and smiled. It was a thoughtful, almost philosophical smile, but also one filled with love. In that moment, it seemed as if he were saying, "There is no perfect cure for heartache. This woman suffers because she thinks I don't love her. So I give her Rio de Janeiro, and she will find peace." Being a man of science, he even wrote down this observation for future study. But something unexpected pierced Dona Evarista's heart like an arrow. Still, she kept calm. All she said was that if he wouldn't go with her, she wouldn't go either. She didn't want to travel alone through the countryside. It wasn't safe or proper. "You can go with your aunt," replied the alienist. In truth, she had already thought of asking that. But she held back. First, because it would cost more money. Second, and more importantly, she believed it was better, more natural and reasonable if the idea came from him. "Oh, but think of all the money we'll have to spend," she sighed, though not very seriously. "What does it matter?" he answered. "We've earned plenty." Just yesterday his clerk had given him the latest account. "Would you like to see it?" he asked. He led her to the books. Donna Evarista was amazed. The pages were filled with numbers that sparkled like stars in the night sky. Then he brought her to the chests where the money was stored. Goodness gracious! There were mounds of gold coins, cruzados stacked upon cruzados, doubloons piled high. It was pure wealth, the kind only kings dreamed of. As she stared at the treasure with wide, dark eyes, Simon watched her closely. Leaning close to her ear, he whispered with a wicked tone, "Who would guess that half a dozen madmen could bring us such fortune?" She understood right away. She smiled gently and answered with quiet acceptance, "God knows what he's doing." 3 months later, they set off on their journey. Aunt Evarista, the pharmacist's wife, her nephew, a priest that the alienist had met in Lisbon and happened to be in Itagoi. 5 or 6 servants, 4 housemaids, and that was the whole group the town saw leaving one morning in May. The goodbyes were sad for everyone except for the alienist. Although Aunt Evarista cried real, heavy tears, they didn't move him at all. A man of science, and only of science, nothing could upset him outside his studies. And if he looked around with a careful, almost suspicious gaze, it wasn't because of sadness, it was because he feared some madman might have slipped unnoticed into the crowd of sane people. "Goodbye," cried the ladies and the pharmacist through their sobs. And off went the group. Crispin Soares, on his way back home, kept his eyes low, between the 2 ears of his chestnut horse. Simon Bacamarte instead stared far ahead into the horizon, letting the horse take care of the path back. What a vivid image of genius and common folk. One looks behind, filled with tears and memories. The other searches the future, full of hope and light. Chapter 4. A New Theory. While Donna Evarista traveled toward Rio de Janeiro in tears, Simon Bacamarte was hard at work chasing a bold and original idea. This idea had the potential to change the very foundation of psychology. All the time he could spare from his duties at the greenhouse was not enough. He walked the streets, visited homes, and talked with people about 30,000 different things. His gaze, sharp and piercing, made even the bravest souls uneasy. One morning 3 weeks had passed since the journey began. Crispin Soares was busy mixing a medicine when someone came to tell him that the alienist wanted to see him. "It's something important," the messenger added, "or so he told me." Crispin turned pale. What could be so urgent if not bad news about the group, especially his wife? Let us make this clear, as the chroniclers insist. Crispin truly loved his wife. For 30 years, they had never spent a single day apart. That's why his recent habit of talking to himself, which servants often overheard, made perfect sense. He would say, "Go on, well done. Who asked you to agree to Cesarius' trip? Flatterer. Despicable flatterer. Just to please Dr. Bacamarte. And now look where you are. Go on, suffer. You weak, cowardly servant. You nod your head to everything, don't you? Here is your reward, you scoundrel." And any other cruel words, the kind no man should ever sign out to others, and certainly not to himself. So imagine how quickly Crispin dropped what he was doing. The moment he heard the message, he left his medicines behind and hurried to the greenhouse. Dr. Bacamarte greeted him with the joy of a true scholar, though his happiness was wrapped tightly in caution, like a shirt buttoned all the way up to the neck. "I am very pleased," said the doctor. "Is it news from our people?" Crispin asked, his voice shaking. The alienist made a grand gesture and replied, "No, this is far more exciting. It is a scientific experiment." Dr. Simon Bacamarte said to Crispin Soares, the apothecary, "I call it an experiment because I do not dare claim my idea as certain just yet. Science itself, dear Mr. Soares, is nothing but a constant search for truth. This, then, is an experimenton that will change the face of the earth. Madness, which has been the focus of my studies, was until now seen as a lonely island in the vast ocean of reason. But I now suspect it may be a whole continent." He paused and waited for the apothecary's shock to sink in. Then he explained his idea in great detail. According to him, insanity covered far more minds than people believed. He supported this with many arguments, quotes, and examples. Some of these examples came from history, others from Itaguayet, being a man of rare intelligence. You realize the danger of naming all the strange cases from our own town, and chose instead to rely on historical figures. So he pointed out famous people like Socrates, who heard voices from a demon, Pascal, who saw a deep abyss on his left, Muhammad, Caracalla, Domitian, Caligula, and many others. In this list were both terrifying figures and ridiculous ones. When the apothecary expressed surprise at such strange company, the alienist told him calmly, "Cruelty, Mr. Soares, is simply the grotesque taken seriously." Crispin Soares raised his hands to the sky and replied with joy, "Brilliant, truly brilliant." As for the idea of expanding the borders of madness, the apothecary thought it wild. Still, modesty was his greatest virtue, and he did not allow himself to say anything but praise. He called the idea noble and true. He even added, with excitement, that it was news for every newspaper. That phrase does not have a perfect match in modern language, but you can imagine what he meant. Something worth shouting from every rooftop. Back then, the town of Itaguaí didn't have a newspaper like bigger cities did. If someone wanted to spread news, they had only two options. Either stick handwritten posters on the church door or the city hall wall, or hire a man with a rattle. That's right, a man with a matraca, a kind of wooden clacker that made a loud noise when spun. This crier would walk through the streets, spinning his rattle now and then until people gathered around him. Then he'd announce whatever message he was paid to share: a new cure for fevers, land for sale, a poem, a church donation, the sharpest scissors in town, or even the best speech of the year. Of course, This system wasn't perfect. The noise could be annoying, and sometimes it caused trouble. But nobody could deny how effective it was. Take one of the town councilors, for example. He was known as the best snake and monkey trainer in the region, even though he had never trained a single animal in his life. Still, he made sure to pay the crier every month to spread his praises. Some people even claimed they saw rattlesnakes dancing on his chest. Of course, that was completely false. But it shows how much trust people had in the system. Not all traditions deserve to be forgotten, no matter what the modern world thought. It's better to act on my idea than just talk about it, said Dr. Simon Bacamarte, answering the apothecary's suggestion. The apothecary agreed. Yes, he said. Let's start by doing something. There will always be time to tell everyone else, the apothecary added. Dr. Bacamarte paused for a moment, thinking deeply. Then he said, if we imagine the human mind as a vast shell, my goal, Mr. Soares, is to find the pearl inside, and that pearl is reason itself. In simpler words, I want to finally draw the line between sanity and madness. Dr. Simon Bacamarte's theory was simple. Reason was the perfect balance of all human faculties, and anything beyond that boundary was madness, pure and complete madness. When he shared this idea with Father Lopes, the priest listened carefully, scratched his head, and finally said what he truly thought. I don't even pretend to understand it, he confessed. This idea sounds absurd. And if it isn't absurd, then it's so enormous that no one should even try to carry it out. Then, adjusting his collar and speaking more firmly, he added, with the definition we already have the same one we've always had, we clearly know where reason ends and madness begins. Why cross that line? A faint smile touched Dr. Bacamarte's thin lips. It wasn't a happy smile or a cruel one, but something between disdain and pity. Still, he didn't say a word. He simply let his silence speak for him. Science had stretched out its hand toward theology, and with such confidence that theology itself began to doubt whether it should trust its own beliefs or accept the new ideas. The town of Itagüí and perhaps the entire world stood on the edge of a great change. Chapter 5. 4 days later, the town of Itagüí was struck with horror upon hearing that a man named Costa had been taken to the greenhouse. No way! Don't say impossible. He was taken this morning. But really, he didn't deserve it. Of all people, after everything he did for this town. Costa had once been one of Itagüí's most respected citizens. He inherited 400,000 cruzados from King Don João versus time, real money. According to his uncle's will, the income from that sum was enough for him to live until the end of time. No sooner had he received the fortune than he started lending it out, no interest, just kindness. 1,000 cruzados to one man, 2,000 to another, 300 to this one, 800 to that one. Within 5 years he had nothing left. If poverty had hit him all at once, the town would have been shocked beyond words. But it came slowly. He went from living in luxury to comfort. From comfort to modest means, from modesty to poverty, and then to misery step by step. At the end of those 5 years, people who once removed their hats when he passed by now slapped him on the back, flicked his nose, or made fun of him. But Costa stayed calm and cheerful. He didn't even mind seeing those who owed him money act the most disrespectful, quite the opposite it seemed. He welcomed them with even more kindness and a kind of noble patience. One day, one of those debtors who never paid back his loan made a cruel joke at Costa's expense. Costa just laughed. A man who disliked him remarked, "Not without cruelty. You put up with him because you're hoping he'll pay you back." Costa didn't think twice. He went straight to the debtor and forgave the loan. "That's no surprise," the same man replied. Costa gave up a starone that's now in heaven. Costa was no fool. He understood perfectly what the man meant, that his kindness was not a virtue, but proof that he was throwing away something others refused to give back. Dr. Baccamarta was not only meticulous, but also remarkably resourceful. Just 2 hours after the rumor began to spread, he found a clever way to disprove it. He took a few banknotes and lent them to the man who supposedly owed him money. Now I hope that he thought, without finishing the sentence. This final act of generosity convinced both believers and skeptics alike. No one doubted any more the noble character of this honorable citizen. The poorest and most desperate people came out of their homes, knocking at his door, wearing old slippers and patched-up cloaks. Yet, deep inside, a worm gnawed at Baccamarte's soul, the opinion of his enemy. But even that changed. 3 months later, his rival showed up asking for a loan of 120 cruzados, promising to repay it in 2 days. It is the last piece of his inheritance, but also a chance for honor. Bacamarte lent the money immediately, without hesitation, and without charging interest. Unfortunately, he never got it back. 5 months later, he was taken to the greenhouse. The town of Itaguaí was stunned when the news spread. Everyone talked about nothing else. Some said he had gone mad during breakfast. Others claimed it happened before dawn. His episodes were described as violent, dark, terrifying or gentle, even amusing, depending on who told the story. Many people rushed to the greenhouse and found the poor doctor calm, slightly surprised, speaking clearly, and asking why he had been brought there. Some even went to talk to the alienist himself. Bacamarte welcomed these feelings of affection and concern, but reminded them that science was science, and he could not allow a madman to wander the streets. The last person to plead for him, because no one dared approach the terrible doctor after what happened, was a poor lady, Bacamarte's cousin. The alienist spoke to her in confidence, explaining that this honorable man was no longer in full control of his mental faculties. This was clear from the way he had carelessly spent the fortune he once had. "That won't do. That won't do at all," the kind lady interrupted firmly. "If he spent all the money so quickly, it wasn't his fault." "No? No, sir. Let me tell you exactly how it happened. My late uncle wasn't a bad man. But when he got angry, he wouldn't even take off his hat for the Holy Sacrament. Well then, one day, not long before he died, he found out that a slave had stolen one of his oxen. Just imagine how furious he became. His face turned red like a pepper. His whole body shook, and foam came from his mouth. I remember it as if it were yesterday. At that moment, a strange-looking man with long hair, wearing only his shirt sleeves, came up and asked for a drink of water. My uncle, may God rest his soul, told him to go drink from the river or from hell. The man looked at him, raised his hand as if to threaten him, and cast this curse. "Every penny of your money won't last more than 7 years and 1 day, just as sure as this is the devil's mark." and he showed the devil's mark burned into his arm. That's what happened, sir. That's the curse from that evil man. Dr. Bacamarte had been staring at the poor lady with eyes as sharp as daggers. When she finished speaking, he politely offered her his hand, just as he would to the viceroy's own wife, and invited her to speak with her cousin. The poor woman believed him. He took her to the greenhouse and locked her inside the gallery of the mad. The news of Dr. Bacamarte's cruel trick spread fear through the town. Nobody wanted to believe that, without reason or hatred, the alienist had locked away in the greenhouse a perfectly reasonable lady who had done nothing wrong except plead for an unfortunate man. People talked about it in the streets and barber shops, and soon a story grew around it. They imagined secret love letters, sweet words once exchanged between the alienist and the cousin of Costa, the jealousy of Costa, and the coldness of the cousin. And from that, revenge. That made sense. But the alienist's serious behavior and his life of study seemed to deny such a theory. Nonsense. All of that was clearly just a cover for a wicked man. You could almost swear he knew something more. One of the more gullible folks whispered under his breath things he didn't dare say out loud because he wasn't 100% sure, but still, he felt certain about it. "You who are so close to him," someone asked, "can't you tell us what's going on? What really happened? What's the reason?" Crispin's sores melted with pride. All these questions from nosy neighbors and stunned friends felt like public recognition. There was no doubt about it anymore. The whole town now knew that he, Crispin, the apothecary, was the true confidant of the alienist right-hand man, the collaborator of greatness. That's why everyone rushed to his pharmacy. His cheerful face and quiet smile said it all, or rather, didn't say it at all. Because Crispin never gave a real answer. At most, head drop one or two short words, dry and wrapped in that loyal tiny smile of his, full of scientific secrets too important to share with anyone. There's definitely something going on, some suspected. One of them just thought it quietly, shrugged and walked away. He had personal matters to handle. Just finished building a luxurious house. The house alone should have been enough to draw attention, but there was more to furniture. Supposedly shipped from Hungary and Holland, visible through the always open windows, and the garden, a masterpiece of style and taste. This man, who made his fortune crafting saddlebags, had always dreamed of owning a grand home, an impressive garden, and rare furnishings. He never quit his business, but he found peace in admiring his new mansion, the finest in Itagua, more magnificent than the greenhouse, nobler than the town hall itself. Among the town's elite, there was sadness and envy whenever they heard the name of the saddlebag maker. "A simple craftsman, for heaven's sake," they would exclaim. And every morning, passers-by would point and whisper, "There he is, standing there, wide-eyed and proud." In the mornings it was common to see Mateus stretched out in the middle of the garden, staring at his house with deep affection. He would lie there for a full hour, eyes fixed on the building, until someone came to call him for breakfast. The neighbors, although polite enough to greet him with respect, couldn't help but laugh behind his backhand. They did so heartily. One of them even joked that Mateus could have become much wealthier if he had built the saddlebags himself. It was a confusing remark, hard to understand, but it always made people laugh out loud. "There he is again," they would say in the afternoon, being admired like some kind of statue. The reason for this comment was simple. When families began going out for their evening stroll, since most dined early, Matthäus took his place by the window. He stood right in the center, dressed all in white, posed against a dark background like a painting come to life. His posture was elegant and proud, and he remained like that for 2 or 3 hours, until night fell completely. It's safe to assume that Matthäus wished to be both seen and envied, even though he never admitted such a thing, not even to his closest friends, Dr. Crispin Soares or Father Lopes. Still, this was exactly what the doctor claimed when the alienist, Simon Bacamarte, suggested that Matthäus might suffer from a rare condition, the obsessive love of stones, a disorder Bacamarte had recently discovered and begun studying. "You think he stares at the house because he loves stone?" the alienist asked. "No, sir," Dr. Soares quickly replied. "No?" Bacamarte repeated, surprised. "Please forgive my interruption, but perhaps you don't know that in the morning, he inspects his work. He doesn't admire the house itself. In the afternoons, however, it's others who admire him and his creation." And the doctor went on to describe how Matthäus spent every late afternoon standing by the window from early dusk until full darkness. A spark of scientific excitement lit up Dr. Bacamarte's eyes. Either he hadn't known all the details about the saddle maker's habits, or he had only wanted to confirm a rumor or suspicion that had reached him before. Whatever the case, the explanation satisfied him. But since his joys were those of a scholar private and restrained, the good doctor noticed nothing that would suggest any darker purpose in the alienist's mind. Early in the morning, as everyone knew, Matthäus would lie down in the middle of his garden and stare at his house for a full hour. He looked at it with love, almost like it was someone dear to him. Only when lunch was ready would someone come to get him. The neighbors, even though they greeted him politely, couldn't help but laugh behind his back. One of them once joked that Matthäus would be much richer if he made the saddlebags for himself, a strange comment that no one really understood, but which always made people laugh out loud. "There goes Matthäus being admired again," they would say in the afternoon. This joke came from the fact that, later in the day, when families went out for a walk, they usually had dinner early. Matthäus would stand by his window. He placed himself right in the center, dressed all in white, against a dark background so he could be clearly seen. Standing tall and proud, he would stay there for 2 or 3 hours until night fell completely. You might think that Matthäus wanted others to admire him and his house, even though he never admitted it to anyone, not even to his close friends, the pharmacist or Father Lopes. But this was exactly what the pharmacist thought when Dr. Simon Bacamarte told him that Matthäus might suffer from lithophilia, a strange obsession the doctor had recently discovered and was studying carefully. "No, sir," Crispin Soares replied quickly. "No? The doctor asked. "Please forgive me, but maybe you don't know that in the morning, he checks his work, not admires it. In the afternoon, it's the others who admire both him and his house." And he explained how Matthäus stood by the window every day, from early afternoon until nightfall. A spark of scientific joy lit up Dr. Simon Bacamarte's eyes. Either he hadn't known about this habit of Matthäus, or he had only wanted to confirm something he had heard before. The explanation satisfied him. But since his happiness was the quiet kind that men of science often feel, the pharmacist noticed nothing that might suggest any hidden or dangerous idea. Dr. Bacamarte's wife, Aunt Evarista's wife, also of Crispin Soares and the rest of the group, or nearly all of them, arrived from Rio de Janeiro. They had left Itagüí a few weeks earlier. The doctor himself went out to greet her, accompanied by the pharmacist, Father Lopes, the city councilman, and many other local officials. The moment when Dona Evarista laid eyes on her husband is described by writers of that time as one of the most moving in human emotional history. This was due to the sharp contrast between their two personalities, both extreme, both remarkable. Dona Evarista cried out, mumbled a word, and threw herself at him. Her movement was so wild and passionate that some compared it to a mix of a jaguar and a dove. But Dr. Bacamarte stayed calm, like a cold medical report. He did not loosen his scientific seriousness for even a second. He simply opened his arms, caught her as she fell into them, and held her as she fainted. It was a short episode. After only 2 minutes, Dona Evarista came to and began receiving greetings from friends. Then the parade started again. Dona Evarista was the hope of Itagüí. People believed she might help lessen the suffering caused by the greenhouse. That's why there were public celebrations, large crowds filling the streets, flags, flowers, and fine fabrics hanging from windows. Her arm resting on Father Lopes, because the great Dr. Bacamarte had placed his wife under the priest's care. She turned her head from side to side, curious, nervous, and full of energy. The priest asked about Rio de Janeiro, a city he hadn't seen since the last vice-regal period. Dona Evarista answered with excitement that it was the most beautiful place in the world. The public promenade was now finished, a paradise where she had walked many times. And the duck fountain. Ah, the duck fountain. Yes, real ducks made of metal, spitting water from their beaks. A truly charming sight. Father Lopes nodded and agreed that Rio must now be even more beautiful than before. Dr. Simon Bacamarte had always been respected, but now Itagüí was buzzing with excitement. After all, it wasn't just any town anymore, it had become the seat of government. Still, no one could really say Itagüí was ugly. It had its charms, fine houses like the one belonging to Mateus, and most notably, the greenhouse. Speaking of the greenhouse, Father Lopes smoothly shifted the conversation toward the matter at hand. You'll find it very full of people, he told Dona Evarista. Really? She asked. Yes, indeed, the priest replied. Mateus is there. The halberdier. That's right. And also Costa, Costa's cousin, and others Fulano, Cicrano. All of them mad? She questioned. Or nearly so, Father Lopes answered carefully. But then what does it mean? She pressed. The vicar let the corners of his mouth droop slightly, as if to say he either didn't know or didn't want to explain everything. It was a vague reply, the kind you can't repeat to someone else because it lacked clear meaning. Dona Evarista truly found it strange that so many people had gone mad. 1 or 2, perhaps, but all of them? On the other hand, it was hard for her to doubt. Her husband was a wise man. He wouldn't bring anyone into the greenhouse without solid proof of madness. No doubt. No doubt, the vicar kept repeating. 3 hours later, nearly 50 guests sat around the table in Dr. Simon Bacamarte's home. It was a welcome dinner, filled with laughter and celebration. Dona Evarista was the star of every toast, speech, poem, metaphor, and dramatic tale told that night. She was described as the wife of a modern Hippocrates, the muse of science, an angel, divine light, the dawn of hope, charity itself, life and comfort wrapped in one. Her eyes were said to hold 2 stars, according to the modest Crispum Soares, and 2 suns, declared a city councilman with great enthusiasm. The alienist listened with mild boredom, though not with visible impatience. At times, he whispered to his wife that such poetic freedom was allowed, even if it meant little. Donna Evarista tried her best to agree with her husband's view. But even after subtracting 3/4 of the flattery, there was still more than enough left to fill her heart with pride. Dr. Simon Bacamarte, the town's leading physician and a man known for his peculiar fascination with the human mind, stood in the center of the gathering like a king surveying his court. The occasion was the celebration of Donna Evarista's birthday, a woman whose presence inspired both admiration and suspicion among the guests. Around the long table, laughter mixed with whispers, and every glance carried hidden meaning. One of the speakers that evening was Martin Brito, a 25-year-old full of charm and confidence. He had spent years winning hearts and collecting stories, and now he rose to speak with the flair of a poet and the pride of a soldier. His voice rang clear as he began. God, he said, after creating man and woman, those shining jewels in the crown of creation, was not yet satisfied. No, he wished to surpass himself, and so he made Donna Evarista. The room fell silent for a moment, then murmured with approval. Donna Evarista lowered her eyes, pretending modesty, though she could not hide the faint smile that played on her lips. 2 older ladies, seated near the host, exchanged uneasy glances. To them, Martin's words were not flattery but flirtation, bold and dangerous. They turned their eyes toward Dr. Bacamarte, hoping to find reassurance in his expression. But the doctor did not look calm. His face was clouded, his stare sharp and unreadable. It was the kind of look that promised trouble. The women clutched their fans tightly. This is going too far, one whispered to the other. Yes, the other replied. I only hope nothing happens tonight. Or if it must, let it wait until tomorrow. They prayed quietly, each in her own way, asking for peace, or at least delay. Still, one of the women, more religious than the other, allowed herself a small doubt. After all, she thought, Donna Evarista is no beauty. She's pleasant enough, yes, but hardly the kind to cause such drama. A warm cup of tea, perhaps, but never fire. Then again, she reminded herself, tastes differ. What if someone found gold where others saw only dust? That thought sent another shiver through her, but less strong this time. For now, the doctor was smiling. He walked over to Martin Brito with measured steps, his posture relaxed, his tone almost cheerful. That was quite a speech, he said. Full of energy, passion truly impressive. Martin bowed slightly, pleased. I assume the idea about Donna Evarista's divine birth came from your own imagination? It did, Martin replied. I thought of it just before I spoke. It seemed right for the moment. The doctor nodded slowly. You have a talent for bold ideas, he said. Not soft or silly ones, but grand, dramatic thoughts. You speak like a writer of epics. Martin smiled again, proud and unaware of the storm that might still come. Dr. Simon Bacamarte, the town's leading expert on the mind, had been studying madness for years. He believed that Sao Paulo was the perfect place to unlock its secrets. His theories were bold and complex, but one thing was clear. He saw madness not just in the usual places, but everywhere hidden, subtle, waiting. One day, a young man named Martin Brito wrote a poem about the fall of the Marquis of Pombal. In it, he called the minister the fiercest dragon of nothing, crushed by the vengeful claws of everything. It was dramatic, powerful, and strange. When Dr. Bacamarte read it, he paused. Poor young man, he thought. Clearly, this is a case of brain damage. Not serious, but very interesting. 3 days later, Martin was taken to the greenhouse, the doctor's private clinic for mental cases. Donna Evarista, a respected woman in town, heard the news and couldn't believe it. A boy with such beautiful ideas? She said. How could this happen? She and her friend quickly decided the reason: jealousy. The doctor must have been angry because the young man had once spoken too boldly about his wife. That had to be it. But then José Borges do Couto Leme was taken. A fine man. Then Chico das Cambraias, known for always joking around. Then Fabricio, a quiet clerk. And more followed. Fear grew fast. No one knew who was sane anymore. Wives lit candles to Our Lady when their husbands left home. Some men didn't dare walk alone, they hired guards to go with them. It was real terror now. Those who could afford it began to leave town. One man tried to escape, but was caught just 200 steps from the village. He was 30, kind, well-mannered, and unusually polite. So polite, in fact, that he would take off his hat and touch the ground every time he greeted someone. On the street, he might run 10 or 20 yards just to shake hands with a serious man, a lady, or even a child like the son of the local judge. Kindness ran deep in him. It was his true calling. Dr. Simón Bacamarte was no ordinary man. His reputation in Itaguaí was built not just on his rare intelligence, but also on his stubborn refusal to give up. Even when faced with 1, 2, 4, even 6 rejections or cold stares, or whispered complaints, he never gave up. Once he entered a home, he stayed. And the people of the house didn't push him away either. That's how charming Gil Bernardes truly was. So imagine the surprise when this same Gil Bernardesson, who always seemed at ease and well-liked, drawn out of town one early morning. He had heard something that frightened him. Someone told him Dr. Bacamarte was watching him closely. The next day, though, Gil was caught and taken straight to the greenhouse. People began to whisper. We must end this. This cannot go on. Down with tyranny. Despot. Violent man. Goliath. These were not yet shouts in the streets, but murmurs behind closed doors. Still, loud protests would come soon enough. Fear grew quietly among the townspeople, and rebellion was getting closer. Some even thought of sending a petition to the government, asking for Dr. Simón Bacamarte to be arrested and sent away. This idea passed through several minds before it reached Porfirio, the barber, who shouted it loudly in his shop, raising his arms in anger. Let us pause here, for this is one of the most noble moments in this dark tale. Porfirio knew very well that the greenhouse had brought him profit. Since the house began to fill with patients, more and more people came to him for leeches. Yet he said publicly, private interest must yield to public good. He added firmly, we must bring down the tyrant. What makes this moment even more striking is that he spoke these words the very day Dr. Bacamarte had ordered Coelho, a local man, to be locked up in the greenhouse. How can anyone say Coelho is mad? Porfirio cried out. No one answered him. Everyone agreed Coelho was perfectly sane. The only problem between him and the barber was a legal dispute over some land in town. But that came from confusion in an old decree, not from greed or hate. Coelho was known for having a fine character. Dr. Simon Bacamarte loved long conversations, the kind that stretched on for hours and unfolded slowly, like a fine cigar smoked to its very end. That's why he was never truly alone. He preferred men who could string together a few words, but even those who couldn't keep up were welcome by his side. The only people who disliked him were a few odd souls in the town fellows who claimed they were too serious or too busy to chat. When they saw him coming from a distance, they'd turn corners suddenly, duck into shops, or pretend to be deep in thought. It was almost funny. One of these men was Father Lopes, a man who adored Dante and hated Dr. Coelho, another local physician. Father Lopes once described the doctor with a dramatic quote from the Divine Comedy. La boca solleve dal ferro pasto a line, meant for sinners in hell. But most folks didn't get the joke. Some thought it was just another prayer in Latin, while others simply shrugged and went back to their day. Still, everyone knew where Father Lopes stood. His dislike for Coelho was no secret. And though the priest respected Bacamarte's mind, he could never quite warm to the man. Yet even he had to admit, when it came to conversation, the doctor had no equal. Chapter 6. The rebellion began when around 30 people joined the barber and wrote a formal complaint to the city council. They marched together to deliver it, hoping their voices would be heard. But the council refused to accept the petition. The president of the council declared that the greenhouse was a public institution, and science could not be changed by votes or street protests. You should all go back to work, he said at the end. That's our advice. The protesters were furious. The barber stood up and announced they would now raise the flag of rebellion. He said it was time to destroy the greenhouse completely. Itaguaí, he claimed, could no longer allow itself to be used like a dead body for the studies and experiments of a tyrant. Many respectable people, some well-known, others humble but decent, were locked inside the greenhouse, he said. And the alienist scientific tyranny was made worse by greed, because families had to pay him to keep their loved ones there. When the families couldn't pay, the council paid instead. That's not true, the president interrupted. Not true, the barber replied. A little over 2 weeks ago, the president continued, we received a letter from the respected doctor. He told us he is giving up the salary voted by the council, as well as any payment from the families of the patients. He wants to focus on psychological experiments of great importance. This news of such noble action calmed the rebels a bit. Maybe the alienist was mistaken. Yes, but he wasn't doing this for money or power. To prove his mistake, they would need more than protests and loud complaints. The president said this clearly, and everyone in the council applauded. After a moment of silence, the barber spoke again. He said he had been given a public mission, and he would not bring peace back to Itaguaí until the greenhouse was destroyed. This Bastille of human reason, he added, using words he had heard from a local poet, which he repeated with great emphasis. He finished speaking, gave a signal, and everyone followed him out. Imagine the city councilman's predicament. They needed to stop a gathering, a rebellion, an outbreak of violence and bloodshed. To make things worse, one of the council members who had supported the president now heard the barber's nickname for the greenhouse, the Bastille of human reason, and found it so clever that he changed his mind. Completely. He said he thought it wise to pass some kind of measure to reduce the power of the greenhouse. When the president, shocked and angry, expressed his disbelief in strong words, the councilman calmly replied, "I have nothing to do with science. But if so many men we believe to be sane are locked up as madmen, how can we be sure that the madman isn't the alienist himself?" Sebastian Freitas, the dissenting councilman, was a man of eloquence. He spoke carefully but firmly for several minutes longer. His colleagues sat in stunned silence. The president begged him, at least, to set an example by respecting order and the law, and not spreading his ideas in public, where they could fuel the rebellion which, for now, was only a swirling cloud of scattered particles. This image softened the impact of the previous one just enough. Sebastian Freitas promised to hold off on any action, but reserved the right to pursue legal means to reduce the influence of the greenhouse. And he kept repeating to himself, enchanted, "The Bastille of human reason." Meanwhile, the unrest grew stronger. It wasn't 30 people anymore, it was 300. All followed the barber, whose familiar nickname must be mentioned because it gave the rebellion its name. They called him Kanjika, and from then on, the uprising became known as the Kanjika Revolt. The actual number might have been small after all. Many citizens stayed home, either out of fear or from habit and good manners. But the feeling was nearly universal. And those 300 men marching toward the greenhouse, considering the difference between Paris and Itaguaí, could rightly be compared to those who stormed the Bastille. Evarista heard about the rebellion before it reached her house. One of her servants brought the news. At that moment, she was trying on a silk dressone of 37 she had brought from Rio de Janeiro and refused to believe it. "It must be some nonsense," she said, adjusting a pin. "Benedita, check if the hem is okay." "Yes, ma'am," replied Benedita, crouching on the floor. "It's fine. Just turn a little bit like this." "Perfect." "No, it's not nonsense," said the frightened boy. "They're shouting, 'Death to Dr. Bacamarte! Death to the tyrant!'" "Be quiet, you fool. Evaristas napedona Benedita. Look at the left side, it doesn't the seam look a bit crooked? The blue stripe doesn't go all the way down. It looks terrible like this. We need to undo it and fix it properly." Outside, hundreds of voices screamed again. "Death to Dr. Bacamarte! Death to the tyrant!" The rebellion had arrived at Nova Street. Evarista turned pale. For a moment she could not move or speak. Fear froze her in place. Benedita instinctively ran toward the back door. The boy, whom Evarista had ignored moments before, felt a sudden inner joy as he realized the truth was now proving him right. "Death to the alienist," the voices shouted, getting closer. Evarista, though easily moved by joy, knew how to face danger. She didn't faint. Instead, she rushed into the inner room where her husband was studying. When she entered, breathless, the famous doctor was reading a text by Averroes. His eyes, clouded with thought, moved slowly from the book to the ceiling and back again. He saw nothing of the world around him, only the deep workings of his mind. Evarista called her husband twice, but he did not respond. On the third time, he finally heard her and asked what was wrong. Was she sick? "Do you not hear those cries?" asked his tearful wife. The alienist paused, then listened. The shouts were drawing closer, fierce and threatening. He understood everything at once. Rising from the chair behind his desk, he shut the book he had been reading and walked calmly to place it back on the shelf. As the volume's placement slightly disturbed the neat alignment of its neighbors, Dr. Simon Bacamarte took a moment to correct the small but intriguing flaw. Then he told his wife to go inside and not do anything. "No, no," begged the poor woman. "I want to die by your side." Dr. Bacamarte insisted it was not a matter of life or death. Even if it were, he urged her in the name of her own life to stay safe indoors. The unhappy lady bowed her head, obedient and weeping. "Down with the greenhouse," shouted the Kanjikas crowd. The doctor walked toward the front porch and reached it just as the rebellion arrived and halted before him. About 300 men stood there, faces glowing with civic pride yet darkened by despair. "Death! Death!" they cried from every direction as soon as the alienist appeared on the balcony. Dr. Bacamarte raised a hand, asking for silence. But the angry voices drowned him out. Then the barber waved his hat high to quiet the crowd. When he finally gained some calm, he told the alienist he could speak, but warned him not to test the people's patience again. He'll say little or nothing at all if needed. "First, I wish to know what it is you demand." "We demand nothing," replied the barber, his voice trembling with fury. "We give orders. The greenhouse must be torn down, or at least emptied of the wretches inside." "I do not understand." "Oh yes, you do, tyrant. We mean to free the victims of your hatred, your whims, your greed." Dr. Miranda smiled, but the smile of this great man was not something the crowd could easily see. It was just a small movement of 2 or 3 muscles, nothing more. He smiled and replied, "My good sirs, science is a serious matter, and deserves to be treated with seriousness. I do not explain my actions as a physician to anyone, except to my teachers and to God. If you wish to improve the management of the greenhouse, I am ready to listen. But if you demand that I deny myself, you will gain nothing. I could invite some of you, as a group representing the rest, to come with me and see the patients inside. But I will not do that, because it would mean explaining my methods to people who are not experts, something I will never do for laymen, nor for rebels." The doctor said this, and the crowd stood in shock. It was clear they had not expected so much strength, nor such calm confidence. But their surprise grew even more when Dr. Miranda, bowing gravely to the crowd, turned his back on them and walked slowly into the house. The barber quickly recovered himself. Waving his hat in the air, he called out to his friends to tear down the greenhouse. But only a few answered him, and those weakly. It was at this decisive moment that the barber felt a new ambition rise within him, the dream of power. Suddenly, he imagined that by destroying the greenhouse and ending the doctor's influence, he might take control of the city council, dominate all other authorities, and become the true master of Ataguai. For years, he had tried hard to have his name placed in the list for town council elections, but had always been refused, because his position did not match the dignity of such an important role. Now, The chance had arrived now or never. Besides, he had already gone too far in the chaos to turn back. Defeat would mean jail, perhaps even hanging or exile. Unfortunately, the doctor's reply had cooled the anger of his followers. The barber, as soon as he saw what was happening, felt a surge of anger and almost shouted at them, "Scoundrels! Cowards!" But he held himself back and instead spoke like this. "My friends, we must fight until the very end. The fate of Itaguaí rests in your brave and noble hands. Let us destroy the prison that holds your sons and fathers, your mothers and sisters, your relatives and friends, and even yourselves. Otherwise you may die slowly on bread and water, perhaps whipped, locked away in the dungeon of that despicable man." The crowd stirred, murmured, cried out, threatened, and gathered tightly around the barber. It was rebellion waking up again from a brief faint, ready to tear down the green house completely. "Let's go," Porfirio shouted, waving his hat in the air. "Let's go," everyone repeated. But just then, something stopped them. A group of dragoons, marching in perfect rhythm, was entering Nova Street. Chapter 7. The unexpected happened. When the dragoons arrived in front of the Kanjikas, everyone was stunned. At first, the Kanjikas couldn't believe that public force had actually been sent against them. But the barber understood immediately what was happening, and stood ready. The dragoons came to a halt. The captain ordered the crowd to disperse. Although part of the people were willing to obey, the others strongly supported the barber. With great courage, he answered, "We will not disperse. If you want our bodies, take them, but only our bodies. You will not take our honor, our reputation, our rights, or along with them the salvation of Itaguaí." This response from the barber was extremely bold, perhaps even reckless, yet completely understandable. In times of great crisis, people often feel dizzy with emotion. Maybe he also believed wrongly that the dragoons would never use their weapons. That illusion vanished quickly when the captain gave the order to charge at the Kanjikas. The moment was impossible to describe. The crowd roared in fury. Some climbed through windows or ran down the street, trying to escape. But most stayed, filled with anger and pride, encouraged by the barber's words. Defeat seemed certain for the Kanjikas until suddenly, 1/3 of the dragoons, for reasons unknown the chronicles do not say, switched sides and joined the rebellion. This surprising help gave new life to the Kanjikas and brought despair to the ranks of the law-abiding soldiers. The loyal soldiers could not bring themselves to attack their own comrades. One by one, they began to join the rebels. Within minutes, everything had changed. The captain now stood on one side with only a few men, facing a large, angry crowd threatening his life. He had no choice. He admitted defeat and handed his sword to the barber. The victorious revolution wasted no time. They carried the wounded into nearby houses and marched together toward the town hall. The crowd and the soldiers were getting along like old friends, shouting cheers for the king, the viceroy, the town of Itaguaí, and the illustrious Porfirio. Porfirio walked ahead of everyone, holding his sword with such skill that it looked more like a long razor than a weapon. Victory seemed to glow around him like a secret halo. And for the first time, the weight of leadership started showing in his posture. The city council members, watching from their windows, saw the large group below with the soldiers, and thought wrongly that the soldiers had captured the crowd. Without checking further, they rushed inside and voted to write a petition to the viceroy. They asked him to give the dragoons an extra month's pay, claiming their bravery had saved Itagawai from the abyss into which a gang of rebels had thrown it. That dramatic sentence came from Sebastian Freitas, the council member who often disagreed with the others, and whose support for the Kanjikas had shocked his colleagues. But their illusion didn't last long. Cheers for the barber and shouts of death to the council, and death to the alienist, soon reached their ears, bringing them back to reality. The president of the council didn't lose hope. "Whatever our fate," he said, "let us remember that we serve His Majesty and the people." Sebastian Freitas quietly suggested that perhaps the best way to serve the crown and the town would be to leave through the back door and go talk to the local judge. But the entire council rejected the idea. Soon after, the barber, followed by some of his closest men, entered the council chamber and declared the council dismissed. The council didn't resist, they surrendered and were taken straight to jail. Then, the barber's friends proposed that he take control of the town, acting in the name of His Majesty. Porfirio accepted the responsibility, though he admitted it came with many difficulties. He added that he couldn't do it alone and needed the help of his friends. They all agreed without hesitation. The barber went to the window and shared the news with the people below. The crowd cheered and officially confirmed everything by loudly celebrating the barber as their leader. From that moment on, he took the title of protector of the town in the name of His Majesty and the people. Citizens of Itagawai, the proclamation began. A corrupt and violent council plotted against the interests of His Majesty and the people. Public opinion had already condemned it. A small group of brave citizens, supported by the courageous dragoons of His Majesty, have now put an end to it. By unanimous agreement of the town, I have been entrusted with supreme command until His Majesty sees fit to decide what best serves his royal rule. Citizens of Itagawai, I ask only for your trust and help to restore peace and the public finances, both ruined by the council that has now fallen into your hands. Count on my sacrifice, and be certain that the crown will be defended by us. Signed, the protector of the town, in the name of His Majesty and the people, Porfirio Caetano das Neves. Everyone noticed that the proclamation said nothing about the greenhouse. Some believed this silence was proof of the barber's dark intentions. The danger seemed even greater, because, during these very events, the alienist had locked away 7 or 8 people inside, including 2 women. One of them was a relative of the protector himself. It wasn't a direct challenge, nor was it done on purpose. But people saw it that way, and the town held its breath, hoping that within 24 hours the alienist would be in chains, and the terrible prison destroyed. The day ended on a cheerful note. While the town crier walked from corner to corner, reading the proclamation aloud, the people filled the streets and swore to die defending the noble Porfirio. There were few shouts against the greenhouse, showing the people's confidence in the government's actions. The barber had a proclamation issued declaring the day a holiday, and he started talks with the parish priest about holding a Te Deum service. To him, it only made sense that earthly and spiritual powers should join forces on such an occasion. But Father Lopes clearly refused to take part. "In any case," said the barber, his face darkening, Your Reverence once side with the enemies of the government." Father Lopes answered without really answering at all. "How can I take sides when the new government has no enemies?" The barber smiled. It was the truth. Except for the captain, the councilman, and a few leading figures in town, everyone else celebrated the change. Even those who didn't cheer it openly hadn't spoken out against it. Not one tax officer failed to come and receive his orders. In general, families blessed the name of the man who would finally free Itaguaí from the greenhouse and the terrifying Simon Bacamarte. Chapter 8. The barber left the government palace 24 hours after the events described in the previous chapter. Two aides-de-camp walked beside him as he headed straight to the home of Simon Bacamarte. He knew it would have been more appropriate for the government to summon him instead, but he feared the alienist might refuse to come. So the barber chose to seem patient and calm. Meanwhile, the druggist Crispin Soares heard that the barber was on his way to visit the alienist, and panic took over him completely. They're going to arrest him, he thought. His worries grew worse by the minute. In truth, those days had been pure torment for Crispin. The emotional pain he felt during this time of change was beyond words. Never before had a man found himself in such a difficult position. On one side, his close ties with the alienist pulled him toward him. On the other, the barber's victory drew him closer to the victor. Even the first news of the uprising had shaken him deeply, because he knew how many people hated the alienist. But when the barber won, it felt like the final blow. His wife, a strong-willed woman and a close friend of Donna Evarista, insisted he stand by Simon Bacamarte. But deep down, Crispin believed otherwise. He felt in his heart that the alienist's cause was lost, and no one in their right mind would tie themselves to a dying man. Yes, Caton did it, he thought, recalling some talks he once had with Father Lopes. But Caton followed a lost cause, because he was the cause of the Republic. His act was selfish, the act of a miserable egoist. My situation is different. Still, his wife kept pushing him. In the end, Crispin could find no better escape from this inner conflict than pretending to be ill. He declared himself sick and went to bed. The next day, while standing at his bedside, his wife told him, "There goes Porfirio to Dr. Bacamarte's house. And it's not alone. He has company." Crispin only thought one thing. They're going to arrest him. Crispin Soares couldn't stop thinking. One idea led to another, and soon he imagined that if the alienist got arrested, they might come after him too as an accomplice. That thought hit him like a cold shower. He stood up suddenly and said out loud that he was fine now, that he needed to go outside. No matter how much his wife tried to stop him, begging and pleading, he put on his coat and left. Old storytellers agree. The belief that her husband would stand by the alienist in this difficult moment brought great comfort to the apothecary's wife. And they point out, quite wisely, how powerful illusions can be. Because Crispin didn't go to the alienist's house at all. Instead, he walked straight to the government palace with clear purpose. When he arrived, he pretended to be surprised not to find the barber there. He told everyone he had come to show his support, which he hadn't been able to do the day before, because he wasn't feeling well. As he spoke, he coughed a little, just enough to make it believable. The high-ranking officials who heard him speak understood, exactly what this meant. They knew how close Crispin was to the alienist, and they saw the value of his new loyalty. They treated him with great care and respect. They assured him the barber wouldn't be long. His honor had gone to Greenhouse for something important but would return soon. They offered Crispin a chair, something cool to drink, and plenty of praise. They reminded him that the cause of the Honorable Porfirio was now the cause of every patriot. Crispin nodded eagerly, agreeing again and again. He said he had never thought otherwise and promised to send a formal statement to His Majesty himself. Chapter 9. Dr. Simon Bacamarte did not keep the barber waiting. He told him plainly that he could not resist any longer and would soon obey. There was only one request. He asked not to be forced to watch in person as the greenhouse was destroyed. "You are mistaken, Your Honor," said the barber after a pause. "You're wrong to think the government has such destructive plans. Whether rightly or not, people believe most of those locked up there are perfectly sane. But the government understands this is purely a scientific matter. It does not intend to settle scientific questions with simple commands. Besides, the greenhouse is a public institution. That's how we received it from the old city council, now dissolved. Still, there has to be middle path, some solution that brings peace back to the public mind." The alienist could barely hide his surprise. He admitted he had expected something else entirely. The destruction of the asylum, his own arrest, exile, anything but this. "Your amazement," the barber continued seriously, "comes from not seeing the heavy responsibility the government carries. The people, moved by blind pity, which in this case is an honest and understandable anger, might demand certain actions from the government. But the government, aware of its duty, must not give in, at least not fully. That is our position. The generous revolution that yesterday overthrew a corrupt and despised council loudly called for the destruction of the greenhouse. But can the government truly remove madness? No. And if it cannot remove it, can it at least recognize and identify it? Also no, that is a matter for science. Therefore, in such a delicate matter, the government cannot and will not act without your help, Doctor. All it asks is that together, we offer the people some kind of answer. If we stand united, the people will learn to obey." Dr. Simon Bacamarte listened carefully as the barber laid out his suggestion. "One of the better ideas, if Your Honor doesn't have another in mind, would be to move from the greenhouse those patients nearly cured, along with the less serious madmen, and so on. In this way, without great risk, we could show some tolerance and kindness." After a silence of about 3 minutes, the doctor asked, "How many dead and wounded were there yesterday in the fight?" The barber was surprised by the question, but answered quickly, 11 dead and 25 injured. 11 dead and 25 injured. Dr. Bacamarte repeated the numbers 2 or 3 times, as if weighing them in his mind. Then he said the idea didn't seem good to him. He would think of something else and give an answer in a few days. But first, he began asking the barber many questions about what had happened the day before the attack, the defense, the dragoon support, the resistance of the town council, and more. The barber responded eagerly, especially pointing out how much the council had lost people's trust. He admitted that the new government still hadn't won the confidence of the town's leading citizens. But the doctor, he said, could help change that. What the government truly wished for, the barber explained, was not even full support, but at least the goodwill of the finest mind in Itaguaí, perhaps even in the entire kingdom. But none of these words changed the calm and noble face of the great man. He listened in silence, neither proud nor humble, but unmoved like a stone god carved from reason itself. After walking the barber to the door, the doctor muttered to himself, 11 dead and 25 injured, such beautiful cases of brain illness. The signs of duplicity and shamelessness in this barber are clear. And as for the foolishness of those who cheered him, these 11 dead and 25 injured are proof enough. 2 beautiful cases, he added. Long live the illustrious Porfirio, shouted about 30 people waiting outside for the barber. Dr. Simon Bacamarta leaned closer to the window, listening carefully. He caught the last few words of the barber's speech to the crowd of 30 people cheering him on. Because I watch over things, the barber was saying. You can be sure of it. I watch over the will of the people. Trust me, and everything will go in the best possible way. I only ask that you keep order. Order, my friends, is the foundation of any government. Long live the great Porfirio, shouted all 30 voices together, waving their hats in the air. What a pair of fascinating cases, whispered Dr. Bacamarta to himself, his eyes narrowing with interest. Chapter 10. The Restoration within 5 days. The doctor had locked nearly 50 supporters of the new government inside the greenhouse. The people were furious. The government, confused and unsure of what to do, didn't know how to respond to João Pina. Another barber shouted in the streets that Porfirio had been bought with the gold of Simon Bacamarta. These words brought together around João Pina the strongest and most determined people in town. When Porfirio saw his old rival from the barber shop leading the rebellion, he realized that unless he acted fast, he would be finished. He quickly wrote 2 decrees, one closing the greenhouse and the other exiling the doctor. But João Pina stood up and, with powerful words, made it clear that Porfirio's actions were just show, a trick that the people should not fall for. 2 hours later, Porfirio was defeated in shame, and João Pina took over the difficult job of running the town. He soon found in the desk drawers the drafts of the proclamation, the letter to the viceroy, and other official papers from the previous government. Without delay, he ordered copies to be made and sent out. According to the chroniclers, and it's easy to guess, he changed the names. Where the other barber had written about a corrupt city council, João Pina now wrote about an intruder filled with dangerous French ideas and against the sacred interests of His Majesty, and so on. At that moment, a group of soldiers sent by the viceroy entered the town and restored order. The doctor immediately demanded the delivery of the barber Porfirio and about 50 other men, whom he declared insane. Not only did they hand over those men, but they also promised to give him 19 more followers of Porfirio, who were still recovering from wounds received in the first uprising. This moment in the crisis of Itaguaí also marks the peak of Simon Bacamarta's power. Dr. Bacamarta's influence grew without limits, and one of the clearest signs of his power came when the city councillors, once returned to their posts, quickly agreed that Sebastian Freitas should be sent to the asylum. The doctor had heard about how unstable and changeable Freitas' opinions could be, and he decided it was a clear medical case. He asked for him at once. The same thing happened with the pharmacist. When someone told the doctor that Crispin Soares had briefly joined the rebellion of the Canjicas, Bacamarta compared this act to the man's usual support for everything the doctor said. He ordered Crispin's arrest. Crispin did not deny what he had done, but he tried to explain. He said he had acted out of fear when he saw the rebellion winning. He added that he had gone back to bed soon after, feeling ill, and pointed out that he had taken no other actions against the government. Dr. Bacamarte did not argue with him. Instead, he told those around that fear itself can lead to madness, and that Crispin Sores was a perfect example of this kind of mental illness. But the strongest proof of Bacamarte's control over the town was how easily the city council handed over its own president. This honorable official had said in public, during a meeting, that nothing less than 30 almudes of blood would satisfy him to wash away the insult from the Canjicas. These words reached the doctor through the council secretary, who admired such fierce spirit. First, Bacamarte locked up the secretary in the greenhouse. Then he went to the council and told them that the president was suffering from bull madness, a type of insanity he wished to study for the good of all people. At first, the council hesitated, but in the end, they gave in. From that moment on, arrests became unstoppable. Any man who told even the smallest especially, if it helped him somehow, was immediately sent to the greenhouse. To the doctor and his followers, almost every action now looked like a sign of madness. Dr. Simon Bacamarte's reach extended everywhere. Lovers of riddles, makers of puzzles and anagrams, gossips, busybodies, people obsessed with fashion escaped the watchful eyes of the alienists' helpers. He treated young lovers with respect, but had no patience for flirtatious women, explaining that the first gave in to natural feeling, while the second acted from vice. If a man was greedy or wasteful, he ended up at the greenhouse all the same. That's why many believed there was no real rule to decide who was sane and who wasn't. Some old writers even say that Dr. Bacamarte did not always act with honesty. They claim, and I don't know if this is true, that he convinced the town council to pass a law allowing anyone who said they had 2 or 3 ounces of Gothic blood in their veins with no proof, written or otherwise, to wear a silver ring on the thumb of their left hand. These writers believe his secret goal was to help a jeweler friend grow rich. And indeed, after the law passed, the jeweler's shop became very busy. But it's also true that many new patients arrived at the greenhouse because of it. So we cannot easily say what the doctor's true purpose was. As for why everyone who wore the ring ended up locked away in the greenhouse, that remains one of Itagui's darkest mysteries. The most believable explanation is that they were taken in because they kept waving their hands around without reason, in the streets, at home, even inside church. After all, no one doubts that mad people often move their hands like that. But again, this is only guesswork. Nothing is certain. The man has gone too far, the town's leading citizens would say. Oh, if only we had supported Canjicas. One morning on the very day the town council was set to host a grand ball, whole village was shaken by shocking news. The alienist's own wife had been placed in the greenhouse. Dr. Simon Bacamarte listened carefully as Father Lopes described what had happened. It was late at night, almost 2 o'clock in the morning, and Dona Evarista had just been taken to the asylum. I suspected something like this for a while, the doctor said slowly. Her modest behavior during both marriages didn't match the sudden obsession she showed with silks, velvets, jewels, and fancy clothes after returning from Rio de Janeiro. Father Lopes leaned forward, curious. What changed? Everything she talked about was fashion, Dr. Bacamarte explained. If I mentioned ancient courts, she wanted to know how women dressed there. If a lady visited her in my absence, she'd tell me everything about that woman's outfit, before even saying why the visitor came. He paused and continued. One day perhaps you remember she decided to make a new dress every year for the image of Our Lady of the parish church. At first, it seemed harmless. But all these signs were serious. Last night, however, her madness became clear. Father Lopes nodded silently, urging him to go on. She had chosen the dress she would wear to the City Hall ball, the doctor went on. She decorated it herself and prepared everything. The only thing left was to decide between a garnet necklace and a sapphire one. The priest raised an eyebrow. So she couldn't choose? Precisely, said the doctor. 2 days ago, she asked me which one to wear. I told her either would look fine on her. Yesterday, she asked again at breakfast. Later that evening, I found her quiet and thoughtful. He looked directly at Father Lopes. I asked her what was wrong. She said, I wanted to wear the garnet necklace, but the sapphire is so beautiful. I told her to wear the sapphire. Then she asked, but where will the garnet be? That was when I realized how deep her illness had become. Father Lopes frowned slightly, but did not interrupt. She spent the rest of the evening calm, the doctor continued. We dined normally and went to bed. Around midnight, maybe an hour or so later, I woke up and noticed she wasn't beside me. I got up, went to her dressing room, and found her standing in front of both necklaces, trying them on and the mirror on after the other. He shook his head. It was obvious then. There was no doubt. I brought her here immediately. Father Lopes remained silent for a moment. He didn't seem fully convinced, but he didn't argue. Dr. Miranda saw it all and explained that Donna Evarista's condition was a case of luxury manianot incurable, and in any case, worth serious study. I expect to have her well within 6 weeks, he concluded. His selfless devotion as a great physician gave him immense respect. Rumors, inventions, and suspicions all vanished, especially when he showed no hesitation in admitting his own wife to the greenhouse, a woman he loved with all his soul. No one had the right to oppose him any more, much less to accuse him of motives outside the realm of science. He was a noble and serious man, a Hippocrates wrapped in the stern virtues of Cato. Chapter 11. It was early morning when the news spread through Itaguaia like wildfire, and the entire village stopped what it was doing. The message came from the town hall, carried by a nervous clerk who could barely catch his breath. Dr. Simon Bacamarte had decided to release every single inmate of the greenhouse. Every single one? That was impossible. Or at least so everyone thought. At first, people believed only a few would be freed, those who seemed healthier or more reasonable, but not all. Not every last soul inside that strange building on the hill. But the clerk insisted. Yes, all of them, he said. The doctor sent an official letter this morning. He made it very clear. The letter itself was precise and cold, written in Dr. Bacamarte's neat handwriting. In it he explained his decision in numbered points, as if presenting a scientific paper to a group of scholars. First, after reviewing the village's population records and the list of those housed in the greenhouse, he had discovered something shocking. Nearly 4 out of every 5 people in Itaguaia were living inside the asylum. Second, this unusual situation had led him to rethink the foundation of his theory about mental illness. His original belief was that anyone whose mind was not perfectly balanced was, by definition, insane. But now, he questioned whether the opposite might be true. Third, after careful study and reflection, he had come to a new conclusion. Perfect balance of the mind was not normal, it was rare, even unnatural. True madness, he wrote, might actually be having a completely stable mind in a world where most people were flawed and unpredictable. Fourth, based on this new idea, he intended to free all the current inmates of the greenhouse. But there was more. He planned to welcome into the asylum those who appeared to have full mental balance, believing them to be the real cases of concern. Fifth, he reminded the town council that he was devoted to uncovering scientific truth, no matter the cost. He expected the same level of commitment from them. Sixth, and finally, he stated that he would return the salary paid to him for caring for the supposed madmen, minus the actual costs of food, clothing, and other necessities. The town could check the books and money chests of the greenhouse to confirm everything. The shock in Itagawa was immense. People stood frozen in disbelief, their mouths open, eyes wide. How could the great Dr. Bakamartu, who once claimed to understand the human mind better than anyone, now say the sane were the mad and the mad were the sane? But, for the families of the prisoners, joy replaced fear, almost instantly. They rushed to the greenhouse gates, singing and shouting, hugging each other before the doors even opened. That night, the village lit candles in every window, danced in the streets, and shared meals with neighbors they hadn't spoken to in years. Music filled the air, and laughter echoed off the hills. There were dinners, dances, and fireworks. Everyone wanted to celebrate. I won't describe every detail of the festivities. They were wonderful, emotional, and long-lasting, but not important to our story. Still, no one in Itagawa would forget that day for a long, long time. Things go on like this in the world. In the middle of the joy caused by Dr. Simon Bakamarti's letter, nobody noticed the final sentence of paragraph 4, a sentence full of future events. Chapter 12. Dr. Simon Bakamarti was no longer the object of public complaints. The uproar had died down, families returned to their normal lives, and everything seemed back in order. Peace reigned again. The city council resumed control of the government without interference from outside forces. Even President João da Mata and Councilman Freitas went back to their old positions. Porfirio the barber, wiser after all that had happened, having tasted everything. As a poet once said about Napoleon, though Porfirio had tasted something even Napoleon never did. For Napoleon never experienced the greenhouse, decided that the quiet honor of wielding his razor and scissors was better than the dangerous glory of politics. True, he was arrested later, but the people of the town begged the king's mercy on his behalf, which led to his pardon. João Pina was also cleared of charges because he had killed a rebel. Some chroniclers believe this is where the Brazilian saying comes from: a thief who steals from another thief earns 100 years of forgiveness. It may be an immoral proverb, but it has proven very useful over time. Not only did the complaints against Dr. Bacamarte vanish, but there was no bitterness left at all from what he had done. In fact, the patients at the greenhouse, once declared sane by the alienist, felt deep gratitude and admiration for him. Many believed he deserved special recognition. As a result, they threw him a dance, followed by more dances and dinners. The chronicles say that Donna Evarista had briefly considered leaving her husband, but her sadness at losing the company of such a great man overcame any personal offense. And so, the couple became even happier together than before. Equally strong became the friendship between the doctor and the pharmacist. From Baccamarte's actions, the pharmacist concluded that prudence is the most important virtue during times of unrest. He deeply appreciated how generously Baccamarte had not only freed him, but also offered him the hand of a lifelong friend. "He truly is a great man," the pharmacist told his wife, recalling the moment. Dr. Simon Baccamarte stood in the center of the town square, his posture stiff with pride as the townspeople gathered around him. Once again he was free to pursue his work, and so were many others who had been locked away before. Even Martin Brito, who had been confined for praising Donna Evarista far too loudly, now gave a speech this time about the great doctor himself. "His genius," Martin declared, "soars high above the sun, leaving all other minds far below." Simon Baccamarte smiled faintly. "I thank you for your kind words," he said, looking at Martin. "And I do not regret giving you back your freedom." Meanwhile, the town council had finally responded to Dr. Baccamarte's letter. At first, they had only promised to consider the final part of paragraph 4. But now, they had taken action. Without much discussion, they passed a new law. From this day forward, the greenhouse would no longer be just for the mad. It would welcome anyone who seemed perfectly sane. The decision came with a warning. The council had suffered enough during earlier experiments, and they wanted to be careful. So they made it clear permission was temporary, lasting only 1 year. During that time, the doctor could test his new theory about the mind. If things went wrong, the council could shut down the greenhouse before the year was even over. Councilman Freitas also suggested an extra rule. Under no circumstances should any council member ever be sent to the asylum. This clause was quickly approved, despite loud protests from Councilman Galvan. Galvan argued that if the council was going to pass laws based on science, then no one including its own members should be exempt. To make such an exception, he said, was both shameful and absurd. As soon as he spoke those words, the other councilmen began shouting. They called him reckless and foolish. But Galvan simply listened, arms crossed, and said calmly, "I will vote against this exception." Dr. Simon Baccamarte listened carefully to the council's decision. "The council," he concluded, "grants us no special powers, nor removes us from the human spirit." He accepted their conditions without protest. As for excluding councilmen from the greenhouse, he said he would feel deeply sorry if forced to confine any of them. Yet, this very clause proved, in his view, that they lacked perfect balance in their mental faculties. This did not apply, however, to Councilman Galvan. His clear reasoning during the debate and his calm response to the harsh words of his peers showed a well-ordered mind. For this reason, Dr. Baccamarte asked the council to hand him over. The council, still upset with Galvan's behavior, welcomed the doctor's request and voted unanimously to approve the transfer. It must be understood that under the new theory, a single act or statement was not enough to send someone to the greenhouse. A full examination was needed, an extensive review of both past and present behavior. Father Lopes, for example, was only taken in 30 days after the council's decree. The apothecary's wife was confined 40 days later. Her confinement filled her husband with fury. Crispin Soares stormed out of his house, angry and determined. He told everyone he met along the way that he would tear the tyrant's ears off. A man who opposed Dr. Bacamarte overheard this talk. Forgetting all past disagreements, he rushed to warn the doctor about the danger. Simon Bacamarte thanked the man warmly. Within minutes, he saw clearly the man's honesty, good faith, respect for others, and generosity. He shook his hands firmly, and then without hesitation sent him to the greenhouse. "A case like this is rare," he told his astonished wife. "Now let's wait for our friend Crispin." Crispin's sores soon arrived. But grief had calmed his anger. The apothecary did not, after all, tear the doctor's ears off. Dr. Simon Bacamarte turned to the apothecary, placing a firm hand on his shoulder. "Do not lose hope," he said gently. "This is not a lost cause. It's possible your wife suffers from some injury of the brain. I will examine her carefully. But until then, I cannot allow her to remain on the streets." He paused, considering the situation. There was something appealing about keeping the couple together. The husband's cleverness and deceit traits that might seem unkind in others could, in this case, serve as a kind of moral medicine for the woman's better nature. With this in mind, the doctor proposed. "You will work at the pharmacy by day, but you must take your meals with your wife here. You'll spend your nights here too, along with every Sunday and holy day." The offer left Crispin Sores in a terrible position like the donkey between two bundles of hay, unable to choose. He longed to be near his wife again, yet feared returning to the greenhouse. Caught between love and fear, he hesitated for days. In the end, it was Donna Evarista who rescued him from this torment. She offered to act as a go-between, promising to visit her friend and carry messages back and forth. Overcome with gratitude, Crispin knelt and kissed her hands. To the alienist, this final act of selfish cowardice appeared almost noble. 5 months passed and the greenhouse now held nearly 18 patients. Yet Dr. Bacamarte showed no signs of slowing down. He moved from street to street, house to house, always watching, asking questions, studying minds. When he found someone troubled, he brought them in with the same joy he once felt when gathering dozens like coins. This growing imbalance only strengthened his new theory. At last, he believed, the true pathology of the brain had been discovered. One day, he even managed to admit the visiting judge. But he did so only after careful study, observing the man's behavior closely and speaking with several respected members of the town. More than once, he nearly brought in people who seemed perfectly sane. One such case involved a lawyer whose mix of moral and mental qualities convinced the doctor that leaving him free would be dangerous. He ordered the man's arrest at once. But the officer assigned to the task was unsure. He asked for proof. To test the theory, he went to a friend accused of forging a will and suggested casually that he hire one Salustiano, the very lawyer in question, as his legal defense. Pickwick turned to Perker with a questioning look. "Then it seems to you?" "Without doubt. Go, confess everything, the whole truth, whatever it may be, and trust him with your case." The man went to the lawyer, admitted he had forged the will, and finally asked him to take on his case. The lawyer did not refuse. He studied the documents carefully, argued at length, and proved beyond any shadow of doubt that the will was perfectly genuine. The innocence of the accused was officially declared by the judge, and the inheritance passed into his hands. This clever legal advisor owed his freedom to this very experience. but nothing escaped the sharp and original mind of Simon Bacamarte. Bacamarte had long observed the zeal, wisdom, patience, and calmness of this man. He recognized the skill and good judgment shown during such a delicate and complicated situation. And so, he decided immediately to send him back to the greenhouse, though he gave him one of the best rooms available. The mentally ill were now housed according to their character types. There was a section for the humble, those whose madness expressed itself mainly through excessive modesty. Another for the tolerant, another for the truthful, another for the simple-minded, another for the loyal, another for the noble-hearted, another for the clever, another for the sincere, and so on. Of course, the families and friends of these patients cried out against the theory. Some even tried to pressure the town council to revoke the license. But the council had not forgotten the words of Councilman Galvan. If they revoked the license, they feared seeing him back in town, and once again in office. So they refused to act. Simon Bacamarte sent a message to the councilmen, not to thank them, but to congratulate them on this personal act of revenge. When all hope of legal action was gone, several leading citizens of the town secretly approached the barber Porfirio. They promised him full support, people, money, and influence at court if he would lead another movement against the town council and the alienist. The barber told them numero. He explained that ambition had driven him to break the rules the first time, but he had changed his ways. He now saw his mistake and realized how weak the support from his own followers really was. The town council had agreed to give the alienist 1 more year to try his new methods. That meant they had to wait until the year was up, or else ask the viceroy for help if the council refused their request again. He would never suggest using a method he himself had seen fail, especially when it had led to deaths and injuries that still haunted him. "What are you telling me?" the alienist asked in disbelief when a secret agent repeated the conversation between the barber and the town's leaders. 2 days later, the barber was taken to the greenhouse. Arrested for having a dog. Arrested for not having a dog, the poor man cried out. When the year ended, the council granted an extra 6 months to test the new treatments. The ending of this chapter in Itaguai's history was so extraordinary and surprising that it deserved nothing less than 10 full chapters to tell properly. But I will settle for just this final piece of the story, and perhaps the finest example of scientific belief and human sacrifice. Chapter 13. Dr. Simon Bacamarte had moved beyond simply diagnosing madness. Now came the time for treatment, and he showed even more energy and cleverness than before. Everyone in Itagüí agreed. His cures were nothing short of astonishing. People talked about them with great admiration. The method he used was surprisingly smart. Since he had already sorted the madmen into groups based on which moral quality was strongest in them, he decided to fight that very quality head-on. Take modesty, for example. If a man suffered from too much humility, Bacamarte would try to fill him with pride. But he didn't rush things. She adjusted the treatment carefully, depending on the patient's age, health, personality, and social rank. Sometimes, all it took was a fine coat, a ribbon, a stylish wig, or an elegant cane to bring someone back to reason. Other times, the illness proved more stubborn. Then he turned to diamond rings, official titles, and other marks of honor. One patient, a poet, resisted every kind of cure. Dr. Bacamarte began to worry he might never recover. Then came a brilliant idea. He ordered a town crier to go through the streets, loudly praising the man as a genius equal to Garsan and Pindar. It worked like magic, the poor man's mother told her friend. It really did. Another patient also struggled with excessive modesty. He refused to improve, no matter what was tried. But since this one wasn't a writer, he could barely sign his own name. The town crier trick wouldn't work. So Bacamarte thought of another plan. He asked the local academy, known as the Hidden Scholars of Itaguaí, to appoint the man as their secretary. The academy's top positions, president and secretaries, were given by royal decree. A special gift from the late King Dom João, these roles came with the title Excellency and a golden badge to wear on one's hat. Dr. Simón Bacamarte, the town's leading physician and man of science, had long devoted himself to the study of the human mind. His laboratory stood at the heart of Itaguaí, a small but growing town near Rio de Janeiro. The year was 1885, and Brazil still lived under the glow of monarchy, unaware of the changes soon to come. The government in Lisbon first refused to grant him official recognition for his work. But when Dr. Bacamarte explained that he did not seek the title as an award or honor, only as a necessary tool in treating a particularly complex case, the authorities gave in, though not without great effort from the Minister of Navy and Colonies, who happened to be a cousin of the doctor. This became yet another miracle cure. Truly amazing, people whispered in the streets, watching the two former madmen walk with clear eyes and steady steps. Such was the system. One could imagine the rest. Every moral or mental strength was attacked exactly where it seemed strongest, and the result was almost always certain. Not always, though. There were cases where the main quality resisted all efforts. In such moments, the doctor would shift focus, applying to therapy the strategy of war capture in a fortress from one side, if another proved too strong. After 5 months and a half, the greenhouse stood empty. All patients had recovered. Councilman Galvão, once tormented by excess moderation and fairness, found unexpected fortune when an uncle passed away. I say fortune because the uncle left behind a confusing will. Galvão took advantage, bribing judges and tricking other heirs into accepting his version of the truth. Here, the doctor showed his honesty. He freely admitted he played no role in this cure. It was simply nature's healing power, he said. But the same could not be said for Father Lopes. Knowing the priest had no knowledge of Hebrew or Greek, Dr. Bacamarte assigned him the task of critically analyzing the Septuagint translation. The priest accepted the challenge eagerly. 2 months later, he completed a full book on the subject and earned his freedom. As for the pharmacist's wife, she didn't remain long in her cell, although she was treated with care during her stay. "Why hasn't Crispin come to see me?" she asked every day. At first, they told her different excuses. But in time, they gave her the full truth. Mrs. Costanza could not hide her outrage and shame. In the heat of anger, she let loose a storm of scattered insults like scoundrel, rogue, ungrateful wretch, a rotten man who built his fortune selling fake ointments. Oh, that villain! Dr. Simón Bacamarte noted that even if these accusations were not true, they alone proved that the good lady had finally returned to her former state of perfect madness. He immediately discharged her. "Now, If you think the alienist felt joyful watching the last patient leave greenhouse, you clearly still don't understand our man. Plus ultra was his motto. It wasn't enough for him to have discovered the true theory of madness. It wasn't enough to have brought the reign of reason to Itaguai, plus ultra. He didn't feel happy, felt uneasy, deep in thought. Something told him that within this new theory, there lay yet another, newer one waiting to be found. Let's see, he thought. Let me try to find the final truth. He paced slowly across his large study, where the finest library in the Portuguese crown's overseas territories shone with knowledge. He wore a long robe of rich damask fabric, tied at the waist with a silk cord, and golden tasselsa gift from a university. His majestic and serious frame filled the garment completely. His bald head, wide and noble, bore the marks of years spent in constant scientific reflection. His feet, neither small and delicate nor overly large and showy, but just right for his tall build, were covered by simple shoes fastened with modest brass buckles. Look closely now. The only luxury he showed came from science. Everything else about him, his manner, his clothes, his home bore the mark of moderation and simplicity, virtues fitting for a wise man. Dr. Simão Bacamarte stood alone in his vast library, pacing from one end to the other with a troubled mind. He was lost in thought, indifferent to everything except the dark mystery of brain pathology. Suddenly, he stopped. He stood by a window, his left elbow resting on his open right hand, his chin in his closed left fist. In that strange pose, he asked himself, but were they truly mad? And did I cure them? Or was what seemed like healing only the discovery of perfect mental imbalance? He dug deeper into this idea, and soon reached a shocking conclusion. The healthy brains he had just cured were as unbalanced as the others. Yes, he admitted to himself, he could not claim to have given them new feelings or abilities. Those things had always been there, hidden but present. When he reached this point, the great doctor felt two opposing emotions, joy and despair. The joy came from realizing, after years of patient study, hard work, and struggle with public opinion, that Itaguai had no madmen. Not one single lunatic lived in the town. But as this thought cooled his soul, doubt crept in and cancelled his happiness. Wait, did Itaguai really have no sane minds at all? Was such an absolute conclusion not flawed by its very nature? And if so, did it not destroy the grand and majestic structure of his new psychological doctrine? The pain Dr. Bacamarte felt is described by Itaguai's chroniclers as one of the most terrifying storms of the human soul. But storms only frighten the weak. The strong stand firm and face the thunder. 20 minutes passed. Slowly, a soft light returned to the doctor's face. Yes, he thought, it must be this. This was it. Dr. Simão Bacamarte looked deep into himself and found what he believed to be the perfect balance of mind and character. He felt sure he had every quality a wise and noble person should have: cleverness, patience, determination, kindness, honesty, strength of spirit, loyalty, and more. In fact, he thought he was the very picture of a truly sane man. At first, he doubted his own judgment. Maybe it was just an illusion. But being a careful man, he decided to ask his friends for their honest opinion. He gathered them together and asked straight away, "Do you see any flaw in me? None, they all replied at once. No bad habits either. Nothing. So everything in me is perfect? Everything. But Simon cried out, "No, that's impossible. I don't feel this greatness you describe so highly. You must be moved by sympathy. I've studied myself carefully, and I find nothing that justifies such praise." His friends stood firm in their belief. The doctor resisted, but finally Father Lopes gave an answer worthy of a wise observer. "You know why you don't see your own great qualities? It's because you have one more virtue that makes the others shine even brighter: humility." That settled it. Dr. Bacamarte bowed his head, feeling both joyful and sad, though more joyful than sad. Right after, he returned to the greenhouse. His wife and friends begged him to stay, saying he was perfectly healthy and balanced in mind. But no pleading, no words, not even tears could change his mind for a second. "This is a matter of science," he said. "It's about a new theory, and I am its first example. In me, theory and practice become one." "Simon, my love," his wife wept, her face wet with tears. But the great doctor, eyes burning with scientific certainty, closed his ears to her sorrow and gently turned her away. Once the door of the greenhouse was shut behind him, he gave himself fully to the study and cure of his own mind. They say the chroniclers recorded that he died 17 months later, in exactly the same condition he had arrived, without ever achieving anything. Some even go so far as to suggest that no other madman ever existed in Itaguaí except for him. But this belief, based only on a rumor that spread after the alien has passed away, has no proof besides the rumor itself, and even that is questionable, since it's said to come from Father Lopes, who had once praised the great man's qualities with such passion. Regardless of the truth, his funeral was carried out with great pomp and rare solemnity.
Thank you for listening so far. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like our channel and click the bell to be notified whenever a new book is read. Have you heard of Machado de Assis? Machado de Assis, born in Rio de Janeiro in 1839, is considered one of the greatest writers in Brazilian literature and a master of psychological realism. He was a novelist, poet, playwright, and short story writer whose works explore the complexities of human behavior with irony, subtlety, and deep introspection. Among his most famous novels are Dom Casmurro, which questions truth and memory, and the posthumous memoirs of Brás Cubas, a satirical narrative told by a deceased man. Machado's literature often reflects the contradictions of Brazilian society, addressing issues like race, class, power, and identity in a sophisticated yet accessible style. Despite being born into poverty and facing racial prejudice, Machado de Assis rose to become the president of the Brazilian Academy of Letters and a symbol of literary excellence. His sharp wit and profound observations about society and the human soul make his works timeless and universally relevant. Today, he is recognized not only as a Brazilian icon, but also as a world-class author whose legacy continues to influence generations of writers and thinkers. Machado de Assis shows us that literature can be both elegant and critical, intimate and universal, humorous and profound. His stories remain as powerful and thought-provoking today as they were more than a century ago. Machado is a treasure of world literature, and through his voice, we discover the infinite layers of the human experience.